screams in the night. Indian legends. Miles of footprints. Sightings. What are these elusive hominids that stalk the wilderness? Join us for eyewitness accounts, questions and answers, Bigfoot encounters of the past, and ongoing encounters in the present. Your host, two-time witness, field researcher for 43 years, William Jevning. Welcome to the mystery. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How's it going?
It's going good. We have Taz with us this evening, and if our cards are falling correctly, we'll have another guest after the break, but if not, we'll go directly to the Q&A session. But Taz, you've been waiting a long time to tell what happened to you. I think you told me in your email 20 years.
Almost 20 years.
The microphone's yours. Tell us what happened.
I was working for a company doing cellular phone antennas, doing cell sites. We traveled around, and at the time we were in Pennsylvania, about an hour away from the Poconos. And I'm extremely afraid of snakes. I'm not going to lie. If I see a snake, I will run like a 6-year-old girl, petrified of them. And the guys I was working with, they knew this, and of course they, busted my stones. We were working on a cell site in Pennsylvania, and it was up in the mountains, and it was like a lot of woods around the area. So I came out of the little bunker where all the communication systems go, and they had put a fake snake right there on the step. Scared me. Climbed the tower, come down, take lunch, and I had to use the bathroom. Well, we use a bucket and a bag, and we take it in the woods, and we do our business. So I go out to the woods. I keep watching to make sure that they're not following me to try to scare me again with a snake. After I'm sitting there for about 15 minutes, I start to hear a noise. And I finished my business. I tied the bag up. And now I was getting ready to throw the bag of poop at them when they came into the woods. And I looked over and I seen the leaves falling from trees. And then this thing fell or jumped out of the tree. And then it stood straight up and started to walk. It stopped. It looked right at me. I was petrified. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know it was about 40 feet away from me. If it wanted me, within 2 steps, it would have had me. And it just looked at me and made a noise. Like a growl, like he knew I know he knew I was there because he looked right at me. And if I wasn't holding a bag of shit, I would have shit my pants. And at the time, I didn't think to, the noises. I never heard much. I've never heard a Bigfoot noise, anything like that. I always thought they were real. Anybody I've ever told, of course, I got made fun of, saying, "Oh, Bigfoot aren't in Pennsylvania. What are you, crazy?" And I said, "What do you think? There's only one Bigfoot in the world? There's hundreds of them probably. They're families. They're colonies." And they tease me, blah, blah, so I just don't say anything to anybody. But, yeah, then I remember, after I, listening to different Bigfoot shows, I do remember hearing the chatter, the noises, the knocks, the whoops, all throughout the day when we were up on that tower. And we just thought it was other animals. And when the Bigfoot growled at me, the guys I was working with heard it, and they thought I was trying to scare them because they had just gotten me with a fake snake. And it was kind of hard to really tell people, even like my own family. They just look at me like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, you saw Bigfoot." Mm-hmm. But to be able to tell people who believe in him and who have seen him, it's like a weight off the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just...
Can you give us a description? I mean, you were fairly close, and do you think it was an adult or a younger individual?
It was definitely an adult. This thing had to be close to 9 feet tall.
Holy cow.
I mean, the stride that it took, within 3 steps, it was out of my sight. And like I said, if he would have turned and came at me 2 steps, he would have had me.
Hey, Taz, did it give you like a snarl, or did it look at you with an evil look?
It looked at me with an evil look. But I don't know if because it knew I was with 3 other people, maybe they thought I don't know if it thought the other people were with me, but it just gave me a look like I didn't belong there and could get out as quick as possible. And the snarl was very deep. It wasn't like a scream, but yet I felt it, and I smelt it, and it was bad. I mean, I'm Italian, and I'm when I get tan, I get very dark. This was summertime, and when I walked out of the woods, they said I looked pale white.
Wow.
I couldn't even go back the next day to finish the site. I told them I was sick.
Oh, what color was its hair? Was it like charcoal, or was it more reddish, or?
It was like a brownish. It was dark brown, but like I guess it had like a little bit of reddish in it. It was weird. It was like something I've never seen before. The hair was fairly long on its arms, back, legs, and on its body, and on its head it was a little shorter. Its face was covered in it, but you could still see like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the teeth. I mean, I saw every feature in it. And from seeing the Patterson film, it did not have the breast like that one did.
Did you got a good look at the teeth, right?
Yes.
Do you know if it had canines or was it just flat teeth?
They look like canines.
Okay.
Big ones.
Because that makes a difference with the type.
Okay.
Will, what type
was
this was?
Oh, that would be a type 2 for sure with the canines.
Oh. And as telling you now, it's like I got like cold chills, and because it was something like, I mean, I'm going to be 49 next week, and so you're looking, I was 29.
You'd actually be surprised the number of things that are seen there in that part of the country, and I'm going to put you in touch with a good friend of mine there that's had encounters.
Okay.
So,
yeah, it's. I mean, I feel like I said in my email, I feel blessed to have seen one, because there's millions of people out there who don't believe in them and never have seen one. And would I like to see another one? Yes. That close? Hell no. But I just, because it happened, it seemed like I was standing out there looking at him for 20 minutes. But it was only really about 2-3 seconds. Mm-hmm. But it felt like 20 minutes. Like I stood there, I couldn't move. Even after it was gone, I couldn't move.
Yeah.
And as I walked out of the woods, I couldn't speak. And they were like, "What's wrong?" And I didn't say anything. We got back to the room, and there was 2 of us to a room. And I told my roommate, Bill, I'm like, "Dude," I said, "I think I saw Bigfoot today." He's like, "Ah, man, shut the, man, you didn't see nothing. That he doesn't exist. It's like the Loch Ness Monster. It doesn't exist." I'm like, "Okay. I'm telling you what I saw." "Ah, you saw a bear." No, I've seen bear before. That wasn't a bear. Bear can't walk like that.
And Taz, let me ask you, because you said like you were basically paralyzed in the moment, and because the question always comes up, well, why didn't the person take a picture? But it would have been, I mean, that's probably the last thing on your mind, right?
Well, yeah, and at the time the cellular phones did not have cameras.
Oh,
we actually had we had the Nextel with the little 2-way chirper thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's what we had, because to tell you the truth, I might have been able to, but then again, I don't know in the moment. Cause I just stood there, like, and I was in the midst of swinging the bag I had in my hand because I was going to throw it at one of my buddies for coming in there messing with me. And, I mean, could you imagine if I threw it at Bigfoot? How mad he would
That wouldn't have been good.
No. But, like I said, it just stood there swinging this bag. And I don't know if I was still swinging the bag when I was looking at him because, like, he was walking and I'm like, I didn't move. When I seen it fall, first thing I thought was a bear. I don't know if it fell or if it jumped out.
Mm-hmm.
And it started to walk, and it looked at me. And it turned its body. Like it didn't have a neck. So it couldn't turn its head. Like, it didn't look capable of turning its head. It just turned its body and just stared at me. And it was weird, though. Like, the arms were down a little bit past the knees, and the hands were, like, facing back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do a comedy podcast. We're called The Idiots. And now me and my partner, we're starting up a show called The Filthy Animals. And I do a little stand-up comedy as well. And a lot of times people, tell us about the Bigfoot, and they make a joke of it. So I try to make jokes about it. But it wasn't a joke. I know what I saw. I believe it in my heart that that's what I saw was a Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to joke about something that has that traumatic an effect on a person.
Yeah, it's I told my wife, and what were you smoking pot that day? Blah blah blah. I'm like, I wasn't high. Trust me, I'm telling you the truth.
Hey, Will, let me ask you, because Taz says that he doesn't know if it maybe fell from the tree or if it jumped. But I imagine you probably think that it deliberately jumped and to let him know that he was there, right?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say yeah, because I think if it would have fell, the way it would have landed, like it's just dropped to the ground and it stood straight up, as if like you or I jumping off of a table, and when you jump, your knees bend, and then you slowly get up. Well, that's how it just landed, and I felt the ground move when this thing landed.
Let me ask you.
I mean,
when you saw its teeth and it growled, did it bare its teeth at you, or did you just saw the teeth from an open mouth?
It bared its teeth at me.
Okay, so it actually pulled its lips back and.
Yes.
So
it
basically, basically what it was doing was challenging you. That's my anthropologist friend John. The term he uses, and it's what anthropologists use for primates that do that, is a lip flip, and it's a challenge.
Well, that's a challenge. He would have won. He would have won that challenge 100%.
And it's probably, you just standing still like that, he got the upper hand, so that's why he left. And probably, was aware of your friends nearby, and that's why nothing else happened, because there were multiple people within that vicinity, which is a good thing for you.
Do you think if I would have ran, it would have chased me?
It's very possible. It's hard telling. I mean, from individual to individual, what their mindset is and disposition and all that, but it is possible, sure.
And like I said, and then, listening to some of the different shows, I remember hearing the whooping, the screaming, the chatter, the knocks. I remember hearing that. Because we got to the cell site probably about 7 o'clock in the morning, and now it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're up on the tower. I mean, the cell tower, Jesus, had to be 280 feet, and we're up there. And you could see Elena. It was all woods. It was thick woods. You couldn't really see into the woods, but you could hear, and there was probably about 4 or 5 different sounds.
Oh, so you definitely had the group there.
Yeah, when listening to the different shows, I hear the similarities of what I heard that day.
And Tess,
I never just. Barry, what? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, did anything happen after this, like that night? Did you hear any more sounds, or obviously you probably didn't have any more sightings, but
no, I didn't. We went back to the hotel. See, I live in New Jersey.
Oh,
and we got sent out. That we were in Cincinnati, Kentucky, We went all over doing different cell sites. We got subbed out to a different company. And so we were there. We went to that site. We loaded up. We dropped off all the equipment. We run the cables up the tower. The next day they had to go back and orientate the antennas. And it was probably about a 3-4 hour job that was left. And I told them I wasn't going back.
Did you believe in the creature before this, before you actually saw it, or were you kind of a skeptic? Or
I believed in it because too many people. I mean, I know there's hoaxes out there, and people want to try to get famous over something, which I don't understand why. But I believed in that it's very well possible out there that it is out there. I mean, I also believe in aliens. I believe in ghosts. You know, there's my wife, she doesn't. But, well, she does believe in ghosts now. But, however, like, the Bigfoot, she just, you know, and I told her I was going to be on the show tonight. She's like, okay, you go tell your Bigfoot story. Like, no support from my family.
You know, I tell people all the time, it's very important that witnesses tell their stories because there's a lot of people out there that listen that are in a position where they're, you know, very reluctant to talk about what happened. And it's, you know, in your case, you know, it eats away at you for years until you're able to let that go and get it off your shoulders. And it really helps other people.
Yeah, it's something, I mean, I tell some guys at work, and they're like, oh, you're nuts. And they say, I won't believe in it until I see proof. I'm like, what do you mean see proof? There's people out there every day finding real proof, solid proof that he exists.
This is true.
They said that the people I was working with, they went back out into the woods to see if they saw anything, because I had told the guy I was rooming with, and they said they saw a track, a Bigfoot track, but they thought I made it.
Oh.
Because I'm only 5'8", but I have a size 13 foot. So I'm like, there's just no way I could make a track of a 9 foot tall, almost 9 foot tall. It had to be at least 800 pounds.
Yeah, you know, Taz, I read this article today, too, where they estimate that of all the encounters that people have, they estimate that just about maybe 1 out of 10 ever get reported to a reputable source. And then of those, they say that it's probably even less than that, because since so many sightings probably take place out in rural areas, it's maybe more like 1 out of 15 or maybe even 1 out of 20 that actually gets not necessarily media coverage, but I'm just saying exposure, really, word of mouth, things like that. Well, what would you estimate that? Would you say?
What's that now? What would I estimate?
Yeah, like how many encounters actually get reported?
Oh, for every one, I've held to my own belief that there's at least 20 that don't get reported for every one that does.
Yeah.
Probably more.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I wish more people. I mean, I see why they don't come out and say, because, you know, people that don't believe, you know, will ridicule them. But, you know, honestly, I didn't care anytime anybody didn't believe me, because I know what I saw. And I said I want to confirm it with somebody, and that's when I reached out to Will to, you know, please confirm that, you know, this is exactly what I saw, because I don't want all these years of me keeping it in and, you know, getting chastised by my friends and family to be for nothing.
And you're not alone. I've heard numerous encounters very, very similar to yours.
Have you ever heard any where the Sasquatch had come out of the tree?
Yes.
Okay. That's where, you know, had me, you know, well, if it's 900 pounds, 800 pounds, how the hell did you get up in the tree? Well, why don't you go ask one? I don't know. It climbed the tree.
Right, exactly. And, yeah, it's not too far-fetched. I mean, bears climb trees, so...
Yeah, I didn't watch it climb the tree. I just watched it jump out of the tree.
What sort of a tree was it? Was it a big fir tree, or...?
No, it was just a regular, like, tree in I guess like an oak or it had to be an oak. It had leaves on it.
Okay. Well, that's reasonable. I mean, oak is pretty sturdy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like any branches broke when he fell out, when he jumped out. I think I guess if he would have fell, maybe a branch could have broke,
Sure.
and then that would have been considered him falling. And then I'm wondering if he did fall, if he would have hurt himself, and then got mad and then attacked me.
Yeah, it's very likely it jumped down. Especially considering it issued the challenge and then left.
Yeah, and I guess because it saw me walk in, and I mean, like I said, thank heavens I didn't go 40 more feet, because he would have jumped down right on me or next to me.
And I've talked about this once before, where I think, didn't we talk about it last week, Brian? Somebody brought it up about urinating and defecating out in their environment. And that could be seen as a challenge in their territory, like you're marking their territory.
Yes. That's right. I mean, like I said, listening to you and listen to on your show, I heard you say that before. I've heard guests say that, they relieved themselves, and then that's when they said that they had the sighting.
Yeah, we think nothing of it if we're out camping or doing whatever in forested areas, but in fact, we could actually be giving them the perception that that's what we're doing, is we're actually infringing on their territory and claiming it.
Right.
That would have been more of an insult if you would have thrown the bag at it.
Yeah, it probably would have been. and as big as their feces is, it's a good thing they're not like chimps and be throwing it back at you.
Oh my God. It was
that would make for a bad day.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's a day I'll never forget. It's been, like I said, almost 20 years, and it's like I could still see him. I could still see myself in the woods. My wife does arts and crafts, and she makes wreaths for the holidays. And me and the kids, we go out to the woods and we get grapevine, and even like standing out there waiting for one of the kids, I sometimes look over and I can still see him standing right there.
It's something that never leaves you. That's a certainty.
No. But like I said, even as scared as I was, I still feel like, blessed that I was able to have seen one, because I know now, that it's not going on listening to stories from other people.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I saw, and I know I saw one, and I know I can confirm for myself that they do exist.
And that's where, not to be concerned about people saying, making fun of you and things like that, because what you saw, they didn't see it, so what makes what they say more important than what you're saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was telling a guy at work today after I read your email, and he's like, you didn't see no Bigfoot. I'm like, but you weren't there. And he says, and so if you were there and you saw what I saw, would you be telling me the same thing? No. Okay. So why would you dismiss what I'm telling you that I saw just because you didn't?
Yeah, Taz, we talked about this before on previous shows, but, your eyewitness testimony to a crime is good enough in court for a lot of cases, but the fact that your eyewitness testimony is no good in public opinion with Sasquatch, it's a contradiction, right? It's a paradox. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly, because they have it locked up there. They have it ranked up there with the Loch Ness Monster and with the Abominable Snowman. And, how do we know that the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist? How do we know that Abominable Snowmen don't exist? I mean, aliens, how do we know? People say that they don't believe in them. Do you really think we're the only form of life out there?
Yeah. And, hey, Taz, I was going to ask you, too, what color were its eyes and how big were its eyes?
The eyes were really big. They were like a brownish, but like a light brown. And the eyes, the white of the eyes, they were white.
Okay.
but it was like a brownish, like a tannish brown, like a little darker than a tan, but not quite a brown.
I have a couple
Like
pictures I'll send you to see if they resemble anything that you can correlate.
Definitely. When you had your counter, well, how close were they to you?
15 to 20 feet.
So you were a little closer than I was.
A little too close for comfort.
Yeah, I would say. Because like I said, 40 feet, and he could have taken 2 steps.
And really, 40 feet's not that far.
No, it's not. Like I said, I wouldn't have been able to even get ready to start running, and he would have been at me. He would have had me in his hands.
Right.
I just I kind of wish they weren't so aggressive, but I guess they have to be to survive.
Well, being a wild animal, I mean, that's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot you can do about that.
Because if they weren't, and plus, if they weren't so aggressive, I think a lot more people would have seen them and then probably harmed them, to have as a trophy.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody wants to shoot one to have the head on the wall or a Bigfoot rug on their floor.
Right.
I just can't see killing one. That's all. I just can't see killing them.
Mm-hmm. Brian, did you have
But
any...
I guess in self-defense.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I said but I guess in self-defense, I could see then, you have to exterminate one.
Sure. Brian, did you have any other further questions?
Maybe just one more question. Taz, you may have covered this. I apologize, but right when the creature walked away, did you just sprint back to your camp, or did you just walk quickly away, or did you just stay there in silence? Just kind of.
I stood there in silence. I stood there in silence for a few moments because I still was unable to. I still was in shock. I was still frozen, and then I just turned and walked out of the woods. And like I said, then I seen my friends, and they were like, I looked white as a ghost.
Wow.
They had thought the noise that the Bigfoot made, that I did that trying to scare them.
And you're not the only person I've heard say that either, that after the creature left, you stayed there still frozen. I've interviewed other people that said exactly the same thing. One guy I interviewed years ago said, I don't know, I heard this thing was coming, and I just froze, and it actually charged him. It stopped 15 feet or so in front of him. They stood there and looked at each other for a few moments. It turned and walked away. And he said, I just stood there. I was petrified. And then he finally regained his, senses and abilities to move. And he, went back to his, the car with his friend that was waiting there. But I've heard a number of people say exactly that thing.
It's not something that I was able to to think about. All I thought about was, what am I looking at? Is this for real?
Hey, Taz, one more question. You mentioned that this happened about 20 years ago. Just out of curiosity, do you still keep in touch with those guys that you were with, and do they ever come around to believe in you? Or
no, none of them. And they still don't believe me. I'm still friends with 2 of them, and when I do see them, they were, come to my kid's birthday party, and they'll still tease, tell everybody how the time you saw Bigfoot. Want to hear something funny? You can laugh all you want. I know what I saw. And then then they look kind of stupid for, because I tell the story. And people can see it in my face that I'm not making it up.
Right.
Some say, I believe you saw something. I just don't know you. I don't think you saw a Bigfoot. I believe you saw something, but I don't believe it was a Bigfoot.
I think it's hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around it.
Yeah, it's like some of these people, they just don't want to believe that it's true. My 12-year-old son believes me. My 21-year-old son, he's like, okay. Mm-hmm. And my 18-year-old daughter's like, don't tell my friends that. You'll embarrass me. My 12-year-old, he tells his friends, my dad saw Bigfoot. So I got at least 1 out of 3 believes me.
Did you do you have any questions for us, Taz?
Yeah, anything you could send me would be great.
Okay. I've got a bunch of
and
stuff I can send you. And I want to put you in touch with my friend in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, definitely. I really would like to. I think I wouldn't. I would definitely love to go out on a trip out there to hear some of the sounds and see what you guys do. It's something I think I'm ready to go back out into the woods and face what had me so scared.
Well, we might be able to arrange
As long as I'm with people. As long as I'm with people who, like I said, who believe in it and aren't making, stupid jokes to try to scare, because
Right.
I'll tell you what, that's not something to play around with.
No, it isn't.
Because it was extremely scary.
Well, listen, fellas, Taz, thank you so much for sharing, and I definitely I'm going to stay in touch with you because I got some things I want to send you, and I want to put you in touch with my friend there. But
thank you so much, Will.
We definitely appreciate you talking to us and sharing that, and listeners always benefit from what witnesses have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I'm so glad. I'm so thankful that you guys let me come on the show and tell it. I just feel like, right now I feel like the wind's taken out of me because it feels so good to finally be able to tell people who have seen one and understand what could understand the fear that I felt and understand the concern and understand the questions and the what ifs and did I really see this and understand that, getting made fun of from the non-believers.
Absolutely. And it does make a big difference, not just for, like I said, the people who hear it, who haven't talked about what they've seen, but for witnesses like yourself to just get it off your chest. It's a big release. And I've had a lot of people contact me, many who don't want, their identities revealed for, work purposes and things like that. Some very high-level people, as a matter of fact, but just had to get it off their chest. And afterwards they were able to move on with their lives and not have that eating away at them.
Yeah, it's like I said, that's how I felt. Like today, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait until he calls. I got to tell him. I want to tell him so bad. Oh my God. And I didn't want to put it in the email just because I don't know. I don't know why. I couldn't type it. It
Sometimes
was so
it's better
much
just to
type.
talk, It's hard
exactly.
to write. It's hard to write the emotion sometimes.
Exactly. Yes.
And Will, I was going to say too, Tom, who we had on a few weeks ago, and his cousin and his friend who had those encounters, the road crossings and stuff, they said the exact same thing that Taz just said, that they thanked us for letting them on and being able to kind of get it off their chest, and they just feel a sigh of relief afterwards, just like Taz was saying.
Yeah, a lot of witnesses have that exact feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I know even when I was a kid, teenager, was able to talk to somebody, who didn't laugh at me about what I saw, and I know exactly that feeling.
Right. Sometimes things, a lot of times I would just, laugh at it too, and just so, they would just stop laughing. I'd start laughing at it too, or I'd start making jokes about it too.
Sure.
Like I said, I used it in my stand-up a couple times. Actually, it went over pretty well with people, but the truth is that it wasn't funny, and it's not funny to not be believed in something that was so traumatic.
Oh yeah, I know. Believe me, I know firsthand.
Yeah, you guys probably get it all the time.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, thanks again for coming on. We certainly appreciate it, and I will be sending you some things.
Much. Definitely. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Have a good night, guys.
All right, you too. Well, we're going to take a short break, folks. Folks, stand by. We'll be right back. We're speaking with James. James, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Well, I'm going to basically hand you the microphone and tell Brian and I what you've experienced.
Okay. Sounds good. It was October 2017, and the lady that I was seeing at the time, we decided to go. I don't know if you want locations or what, but
You don't have
we
to be
decided to go.
specific, but maybe just the part of the country you're in.
Washington State.
Okay, my old stomping grounds.
Yeah, and it's a very, very large lake. I think it's like, I'm wanting to say 10 to 15 miles long. It's a big one.
Is that in Eastern
And
Washington?
No, it is like the Snoqualmie Pass area.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know if you're probably familiar with that area, but yeah, you probably know exactly what lake I'm talking about.
Right.
But yes. Anyways, she decided to go camping the night before, and I was working, and I'm like, I just can't get up there. And so she went up there, and she's just like one of those diehard campers like I am, and she ended up sleeping in the truck after about 2 a.m. Because some stuff was going on, and she wasn't sure what it was. And she was texting me throughout the night saying, I'm not sure exactly what's going on here, but I'm in the truck with the doors locked. I'm like, I don't know why you went up there by yourself. You're crazy. I don't know why you did that, but it's done. And so anyways, she fell asleep. I fell asleep. And she decided, she called me the next day and she goes, are you going to come up? Because this was my, the next day was I didn't have to work. But the night before I did, and I was just completely wiped out. Anyways, I said, absolutely. I'm on my way up, and it was a beautiful October day, no clouds in the sky. All the trees were turning. It was just absolutely gorgeous, and I couldn't wait to get up there. And got up there, and she'd already made camp, obviously, and I built a fire, and we just started enjoying the evening, and we were the only ones on the lake. The night before, she saw a couple of headlights on the other side of the lake, which is, probably, I'm wanting to say, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile across the lake. And there was nobody there. There was no fires, no headlights, no nothing. And this was in the middle of the week, so the weekend campers weren't up there. So we were the only ones. And we were talking to each other, and it started getting toward the evening and everything, and we had a couple of cold ones, in the ice chest, and doing the old camping and the fire thing and all that. And then how this was I that time of year, the water, has subsided a long ways down. So you've got in the wintertime, you've got the water all the way up to the forest line, okay? Well, the lake was down considerably, and we were camped about 100 feet, I'm wanting to say, off of the forest line where the water would have been in the wintertime. And it was kind of a gravelly area. It was nice and clear and perfect spot for, a tent and all that. So that's why she decided to, build the camp a little bit off the forest line there. And we were starting to get a little bit hungry, and we had steaks and some shrimp and some garlic bread and corn on the cob that we wrapped in foil and put it on the, in the coals and stuff. So we had a lovely dinner, and we started our cleanup, and by now it's getting, kind of like dusk. It's starting to get a little bit dark, and we did our cleanup and finished that up, because we're very aware that we don't want that kind of stuff, food laying around our campsite, because there's a lot of, black bears, stuff like that in this part of the country, and put everything in the back of the truck and locked her down. And like I said, we finished our cleanup, and we were just standing there. And by now, after everything was done and put away, it's almost 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. And, we're just, talking about the day, talking about, our campsite and everything. And I was standing, north of the fire, looking out towards the lake, and she was doing the same. We were just standing there, and I'm telling you something, you guys, this thing, I don't know, I'll tell you right now, we did not see it, okay? I've been camping all my life. Same with her. We had been, hunters all our life. We've been in the woods a lot, so we were aware of different sounds and stuff like that. But this thing was all of a sudden, I'm saying it's probably maybe 25 feet back inside of the forest line where the lake would have been or started. And it let out this yell that at first sounded like different things that you might hear in the zoo, like a hyena, different sounds, like all mixed into one. It was the strangest thing. And then it was followed up by probably 20 seconds of a howl in 3 different pitches, 3 distinct pitches. My dad was a singer, so I know what like overtones are and stuff like that. This thing was 3 different pitches and lasted for maybe 15, 20 seconds, and it crescendoed into extremely high, from a low guttural type to extremely high, with all the pitches going up at the same time, mixed in with, I'm not sure if you guys know what a vibrato is. When someone's singing, they have a vibrato in their voice. Finished up with that, and it was extremely, extremely loud. It froze me. It froze her. I looked at her, and I go, what the hell was that? And I was completely freaked out because I've never heard anything like that with that volume. It was like the sound of it just it completely like went through our bodies, and it was instant goosebumps and the hair on the back of my neck, that kind of thing. And she looked at me and she goes, Jimmy, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And I look at her and I'm like, are you kidding me? Because I was completely freaked. And all of a sudden it was like we were like, okay, this is something that is like beyond what we know. I mean, anything that makes that kind of a sound is beyond anything that I've ever heard. And it was, what I don't understand is, out of all the places around this lake that is that huge, why did it pick that spot to show us its presence? I'm not saying, I don't know exactly what it was, but I don't know of anything else that makes a noise that like that. So here's what we did. I'm like, honey, listen, we cannot stay here. And she goes, I agree. How do you want to work this? I'm like, geez, and I felt completely off kilter. Like I felt like discombobulated, completely unorganized in my thoughts and in my actions, and everything was completely off. And I'm the kind of person, I like to know, I know exactly what I'm doing all the time. And I'm like, okay, just So just start packing the truck, and I'm going to shine the flashlight into the woods where we heard this, and I'm going to, like, do, like, guard watch, you know, while you're doing this. So she packed the most important stuff in the truck, okay, and we left the tent, the table, some chairs, and we left. But as we're leaving, I'm like so discombobulated because we were, you know, it's dark now. There's tree stumps everywhere, okay, because the water level has gone down, like I was talking about, and it was like I was driving on the face of the moon, kind of, you know. It was like I couldn't find where I was going. I mean, trying to find a little road, the side road that came down to the lake, we couldn't find it. So I'm like driving in circles, trying to find the exit to get out of here. And we finally found. I was starting to kind of freak out because I felt so off. I felt like almost sick. I don't know how to explain it, but we finally found the exit, and we got out of there, and came home, and the next day after she got off work in the afternoon, we came up and got the rest of our stuff, and I videotaped everything in our camp, and where we heard the noise. I videotaped it with my iPhone, and before this, you guys, I want to tell you, I'm the kind of person that, okay, I'm not going to really believe anything unless I see it myself, and I've been quite a skeptic of this subject, you know, pretty much all my life. Like, you know, whatever, I'll believe it when I see it. But after how this affected me after this happened, I feverishly started going online and trying to find everything on YouTube or everything that I could find that made this sound. And it was like I was obsessed with it all of a sudden. And I still am, because I don't know, you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know exactly what that was. But whatever it was, it changed how I see things right now with me on what really is out there. It changed my life. You know, and I don't know what else to say. That's basically what happened. It rocked me, and it still is rocking me. And this is what over 2 years, 2 years later. And that's what went down. And I don't know if you guys can shed any light on this subject for me, but if you could, I sure would appreciate it.
Do you have any questions? I mean, I guess that's a good place to start from. My number one question would be, is there anything out there that would make this kind of sound with such volume that wouldn't be the subject that we're talking about? What else would it be? Any mundane animal, you mean?
Exactly. Exactly. There's nothing out there that could have done what that did.
No. And I've actually, heard a very similar scream to what you describe in that area over in the Olympic Mountains. And I've mentioned it on the show.
That's not too far from me. Yeah.
And it was the same thing. It's a sound that I couldn't compare to anything, because it doesn't compare to anything known animals or anything I've heard. And I've heard other Sasquatch vocals, but what I heard over there was very different, and the volume was tremendous. There's nothing. No other animal can be that loud.
That is what got me. That's what got me, and I think that made me feel discombobulated. I felt completely unorganized in my movement, my thoughts. Was the volume of this. It was so loud that it I don't know. It was absolutely it. You know what? When she said that was beautiful, I get what she means by that. But at the same time, you know, being a man, my first instinct is to protect, right?
Right.
I didn't want to stick around for anything that could be, you know, because from what I've read and listened to, these things are huge.
Oh yeah.
And I know it could cover the ground between the forest line and where we were at in a very, very, very short time. And you know, this is something that I don't really say to anybody, but I did have a .44 Magnum, and it was like I shot a round into the air because I was that frightened. And that's not something that I do. It was almost like an instinct. It was like it was showing me its power and prowess, you know, like,
right.
And I felt that I had to answer back with that. I mean, I did not shoot into the woods. I would not do that, but I did do it in the air just to let it know, whatever it was, know that, okay, you scared the shit out of me. Excuse my word there, but you scared me, and maybe this will scare you. I mean, that's such a. I know wasn't the right thing for me to do, and we talked about that on the way home. She goes, "You shouldn't have done that," and I'm like, I agree. I agree with you. I should not have done that, but it was almost like I don't know.
At the moment, it felt like the right thing, didn't it?
At the time, yeah, it did, because it was so. It hit us so hard. It hit us so hard. And it completely messed with my. You know, like I was telling you, I was off, and you know, but
now you
estimated
it was around 25 feet inside the tree line. So how
inside the tree line? Yes.
So how far away do you think that was from where the two of you were standing?
I paced this off the next day, and it was almost 100 feet from where we were standing to the forest line, and then probably another, I would say, 25 feet in past that.
That's pretty close.
Or you know, it could have been even farther back than that. Sure. You know, I don't know. But the sound and this is what was weird about this. It echoed across the lake after it made that sound.
Right.
So I heard it twice. I heard that sound twice. It was the original one and then the echo. And it was almost like the second one was almost as loud as the first. That's what's really weird about that. I don't understand how that reverb happened, but you know what I was thinking, and all the three different tones that it held in. I'm wondering, and I recently been wondering this because I've heard that they're in more groups than just one. There's one, maybe there's another one. I don't know.
Right. In fact, you know, the act of it vocalizing like that was probably some kind of an alert to the others in the area of your presence.
That's interesting.
And typically that's what happens.
Well, I got a question.
Yeah.
Prior to the scream, did you notice that the forest around you was maybe dead silent?
There was like, you guys know what loons are, right? The birds that like They're like little ducks or something like that.
Right.
There was some of those down on the lake, and the lake was probably maybe 200 feet away from where we were camped. And there was a couple of those earlier on in the evening, before it had gotten dark. We heard a couple of those down there. What it sounded like loons. But at that point, I can be honest and say that we heard nothing, except for the wind that was blowing through the trees,
Right.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like any other animal or you know, birds are usually asleep by then, nestled down or whatever. But no, I didn't hear anything. I don't think she heard anything either. But yeah, it was a quiet evening.
Right. Because Will, that's a common description, right? That the whole area goes dead silent basically when the creatures are around.
Usually, yeah, but not always.
Not always. Yeah, well, you know, if there was more than one, it did. But the thing that got me is I felt, and maybe this is why I took it kind of personally. I felt that this, like I was saying, it was showing me its power, and it was just showing it to me, like how powerful it was, and whether it was like you were saying, Will, whether it was a warning to maybe more out there, I don't know, or you know, communicating with them somehow. I felt that it was directed towards me. I honestly felt this thing was directed towards me. You know, maybe that sounds weird, but yeah, that's what happened, and it's rocked my world since then. And I have been feverishly looking for anything. I've heard a couple of them that sound like it, but not exactly. And that's kind of disappointed me because I've wanted to hear something that I could go, that was it. That's exactly it. But I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah,
kind of close.
We're definitely limited on recordings. And here's a thought too. I mean, you know, when you mentioned you felt it was directed at you, it may not have been a communication towards others. You know, when we heard the vocal that close up in the Olympics, there were, you know, a number of people in the area because it was a small campground. There was only 7 campsites, but there were people in each one of those. So I don't know, maybe 20 people up there with dogs and teenagers out on the river. And this thing was above us about 100 feet or so, and it let loose with that. And it only did it one time. I had my recorder in my shirt pocket ready. And, you know, I pulled it out, and, of course, you know, it didn't do it again, unfortunately. And that close would have been really an amazing recording. But, you know, in that case, I don't think it was warning others. What it was doing, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Maybe it was saying, hey, you know, this is my area or something to that effect.
That's kind of how I took that. What it did and how loud it was and the sound it made, it sounded very threatening. It wasn't something that whatever it was just walking along, you know, and all of a sudden let out something. I felt it was like completely directed towards me and the lady. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was and it wanted us to get out of there, it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
worked.
That may have been what it was doing.
Right. I mean, if it wanted us to leave, we left. And we left as fast as we could. And her and I have gone camping so many times, and, you know, at that time we were with each other 10 years, and we'd gone camping I don't know how many times through the summer. Mm-hmm. I mean, and we've done winter camping too. And so we've been, you know, and that's she was right along with me let's get out of here. She didn't like go, oh, let's just stick around and see if it happens again. No, she was like getting everything in the back of the truck as fast as she could.
Let me ask you too. You mentioned that she said it was beautiful. Do you think she was thinking it was some normal animal that made that vocal?
Absolutely not. It was, we talked about that on the way back, and she goes, it was beautiful, as in this is what's weird. This is what kind of trips me out a little bit, why I was like, I think it was maybe directed towards me. I don't know. She didn't feel threatened like I did from that. But no, she absolutely, she did not think it was something that was normal. She goes, that's the most incredibly powerful thing that I've ever heard in my life, and it shocked her.
Wow.
It rocked her too. You know, it rocked her too. And she's that kind of person. Like, maybe she said that because, you know, when something happens, you kind of maybe act out of character on what you normally would do. Say, you know.
Right.
And when I thought when she said that to me, I'm like, are you serious? You know, are you kidding me? I mean, okay, I wouldn't call it beautiful. I would call it something that was the most scary thing I've ever heard in my life, and the most powerful thing I've ever heard in my life.
Right.
And but yeah, I've been wanting to talk to someone about this, and you know, I have some really good friends that don't like judge me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I've told a few people, and in confidence, like, I couldn't wait to call my mother. In fact, on the way home that night, I called her, and she didn't answer the phone because she was, you know, asleep. But I could not wait to tell her the next day, because she's like my first go-to, you know, mm-hmm. When something happens like that. And I could not wait to talk to her about it the other day. And I took her up last summer to the exact spot this happened. And we just sat there for probably an hour and just let it all. Oh, I want to tell you this too. On the year's anniversary, my lady and I went back to the same spot, and we camped again, because I'm like, you know what? This is not going to change how I feel about camping. Mm-hmm. And I almost wanted to hear it again. If it was anywhere around, I don't know. But you know what? It was the most peaceful, beautiful evening that night on the return trip. The return camping trip, nothing happened. It was absolutely a wonderful evening with no events going down. And, you know, I halfway expected nothing to happen, but I was like ready for it. It was almost like I had a guilty conscience about, you know, firing in the air, and I was even, this may sound weird, but I was even talking really, really loud and apologizing, just in case whatever was out there might hear what I'm saying or even understand it, which, you know, but I think I had to do that for my own conscience, and apologize for, you know, because I don't know. I don't know.
Did you just spend the one night on the return trip?
On the return trip, it was just one. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. The difference might have been, you know, since your lady friend was there the previous night on the first trip before you were, that may have gotten some attention, and then, you know, things ramped up a little bit the second night.
You know, I've heard that, and this summer I'm going to go back to that spot once the water level goes down a little bit, and do it again. And and this time, you know, I'm probably going to take, like, you know, my weekend and then a couple of days off after that from work, and do like a 4-day a 4-day thing and just stay up there.
I have a guy in that part of the state I'm going to put you in touch with that had
Really?
a pretty scary encounter up in that region. So, yeah, I think it'll prove interesting, to have the two of you in contact.
I would love that. I would love to be able to talk to anybody that cares about this subject. I would absolutely love to do that. And I wanted to mention one more thing about the echo. Behind where we were at, there is this cliff that's, I'm wanting to say, probably several hundred feet high. I mean, you can even see it from, I've every time I pass it, because I go east a lot because I love that area, I see the cliff behind where we were camped, and it's probably maybe even 500-600 feet tall. So it bounced off that cliff back onto the lake. So when this made that noise, it had nowhere else to go but out towards us.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, yeah, if you could put me in touch with this gentleman, that would be outstanding.
Absolutely, and I'm going to send you some pictures of things to watch for when you're out and about like that.
Okay. I know absolutely nothing about it, so any information, anything that you can do, I would muchly appreciate it.
You bet. I'll help you out. Brian, did you have any questions or?
Well, yeah. Did you happen to notice any footprints, or were you not even?
That's what we were looking for the next day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She found a couple feathers back in, and I've got all this on video. She found a couple of feathers, and she found like it looked to be like maybe an area where, I don't know whether it would have been a game trail. I don't know, but it was later in the October, so there was a lot of like stuff on the ground as far as everything that falls off trees. There was a lot of like the summer foliage that was down, but it did look like there in a certain, and I had this on film, where it looked like back into the back, there could have been something that had been using like this area and walking through that maybe, more than once. I'm not an expert tracker. I don't know. But yeah, it did look like there was something back there, but it was so dark. Even though we got back there about 4 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, and I've got this on film too, and I even mentioned, I said, Star, look at how dark it is back there. And I got to admit, I didn't have the gonads to go investigate that. I mean, and follow what we were kind of looking at. I'm like, you know what? Let's just get the hell out of here. Let's get our stuff. If she wanted to stay around and look and explore more, I'm like, let's just get the tent and the table and get the hell out of here. I felt like an urgency to do that. Let's just go. I don't know where that was coming from. It's probably from, the experience. I don't know. But it once I was back up there, I couldn't wait to get out of there. I couldn't wait. But on my return trip, I didn't feel any of that anxiety. Mm-hmm. To leave. I felt none of it. In fact, I felt very peaceful on the return camping trip. I felt extremely peaceful. Everything was just perfect. But the next day, I felt a lot of anxiety going back there. And, I'm a big guy. I've been in the woods all my life. I hike all these mountains that are around me all the time. I'm constantly out there on my days off. So I'm like, I like being out there. But something that I've noticed about myself, I don't go as far out as I used to, especially when I'm by myself. You know what? I hate to say this, it's probably because I'm just a little bit scared. And I never
No,
used.
I totally understand.
I could go 7, 8 miles, 10 miles in on a trail and never even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm
Different story now.
It's changed how I feel about don't get me wrong, I still love the outdoors and I still go out there every chance I get, but I'm much more cautious than I used to be.
Yeah.
So
Hey, when you were leaving the first time, right after the scream and you were packing up and driving back, did you and maybe her, did you immediately suspect Sasquatch, or were you just, I know you were traumatized at that point, but
you know what? I honestly thought it had to have been that.
Mhm.
I honestly, that was the last thing I expected ever to happen to me. But I don't know what else could do what that did. So yeah, I told my lady, and we were talking. She goes, "That's what it was. You know it." She goes, "You know it, Jimmy. You know it." I'm like, "Yes, I do," because I don't know what else on this planet would make that sound. Yes, I do know it. And like I said, I was a skeptic before this encounter, and yeah.
Wow.
I still get pretty much worked up over it, remembering it and, having it all come back to me. I still get kind of worked up about it. But if it happened again, I feel that I need to be more honored with that and not so terrified of it, because it honestly did scare me.
Well, I think the fear is kind of hardwired into us. So.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I really appreciate you guys calling me.
We appreciate you telling us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could have told you I saw it. I wish I could have said that, but that's not what happened.
Well, I think you had a traumatic enough experience.
Yeah, if I saw that on top of hearing that might have done me in. I don't know. I don't know if I would go back out there after if I actually saw it. I don't know if I would do that. But yeah, that was a very interesting thing in my life. And you know what, you guys? I will never forget it as long as I live.
No, you
I
won't.
will never forget that.
I can guarantee that you won't.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, did you have anything else, or?
No, I think that's it.
James, we certainly appreciate it, and I'll get you that contact and some items I'm going to send you.
Okay. That sounds outstanding. Thank you very much, you guys.
All right. Thank you, James.
Okay, you bet. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, we're back. Brian, are you ready for the question and answer session?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know how a couple weeks ago we were talking about the different names that Sasquatch has?
Yes.
Hairy Man, Ape Man, Mountain Man, like all these names. There, have you ever heard of it being called Momo?
Yes, absolutely.
The Missouri Monster?
Yes.
I guess. Or there was an article that came out a couple weeks ago where in Missouri, and I guess, the MO for the state's name and the MO again for the monster,
right.
Abbreviation of the monster. So that was the first time I heard that, but that was kind of funny.
Yeah,
but,
that's actually been around a long time.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something quickly too. Some of the comments people make on the YouTube portion crack me up. One person was kind of bent out of shape, and I don't let all the comments get posted, but this person was kind of bent out of shape that we were calling Sasquatches primates. And I think it's important, if you're gonna make a negative comment about something, do a little research before you do that. All, whether it's monkeys, apes, humans, anything in that, and I can't remember exactly what level that is in terms of where all these animals fall under these categories, what level that category is. But monkeys, apes, humans are all primates. It's just the family that we belong to. So the Sasquatch, because of physical morphological similarities, places them in the family of primates. So they are a primate.
Right. Okay, now I know we talked about colors last week. We talked about the white ones and everything. We've probably talked about this before, but a question from Robert, a listener, he asks, could you ask Will about reported color variations with the types? He says, are certain colors more common to a particular type of the 4 types, or is that just kind of random, the coloration?
I haven't really heard of any. I mean, they're all kind of have the same colorations. The only difference is with the type 4s versus the other varieties is actually hair loss. They seem to be more prone to hair loss than the other variations.
Huh. That's interesting, because I know that that's common in chimpanzees too, right?
I believe so, yeah. And it's just specific to that particular variety.
Huh. That's interesting. Now, speaking of colors, there was a I'm checking out all these books from this Amazon Unlimited, and there was a report of one that it was kind of a weird description, because it said that this guy said that he saw one, and it was kind of like a kind of a dark gray all the way up to its chest, and then as you moved up on its chest and to its face and its neck, and which he said it didn't have much of a neck, but as you got closer to its face, it was almost like all white, which is bizarre. And then it said its arms were actually kind of brownish and reddish, so it was almost like 3 different colors. And what's also interesting about this one is that he said that the head was not cone-shaped; it was actually roundish. Mm-hmm. So, have you ever heard of gotten any reports of these things being multiple colors?
I have a couple times. Now, the thing I'd be concerned with multiple colors like that is it the hair color, or is it something in their hair?
Right.
Causing. I mean, in other words, they might be a lighter color like gray or white, but on portions of their body, they've got something in the hair that's actually colored it. Whether it's like red clay or something like that. That would be my thoughts.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, my theory about the colorizations and everything is that it could very well be random. Just like some people are born with red hair, some people are born with dark hair, blonde hair, etc. And it doesn't seem to be confined to a type.
It's not out of the question. It could be like that. Sure, it's very possible.
Yeah. Now I wanted to ask you about Taz's experience. He talked about the lip flip. Mm-hmm. And what other primates do that? Chimps?
Most primates do it.
They do?
It's a challenge. It's showing, you're showing the hardware to your potential foes, and it's designed to prevent an actual physical altercation. If whichever one is more dominant, the other one backs down. The dominance has been established, and they go their way. Mm-hmm. Because, like we said before, an actual altercation in nature can be a death sentence if there's an injury.
Yeah. And what would have happened if Taz would have copied or mimicked the lip flip? Probably wouldn't have been good.
Probably wouldn't have been good. Although, the Sasquatch is definitely going to have dominance in that situation. So, I don't know, maybe it would have chuckled to itself and walked off anyway, but it's hard telling.
Yeah, whenever you hear a story like that, it is really surprising sometimes that people, and I'm saying it's a good thing that Taz made it out alive, but I'm just saying it just kind of odd sometimes that the Sasquatch doesn't react. It just walks away. You think that if it views someone like Taz in that situation as a, competitor or something, interrupter in their hunt or whatever, that they would be really pissed off. And
again, it goes back to, the individual and all the various things that make up its psychology. Has it even eaten well that day? To alter its mood. There's all kinds of factors, what its normal disposition is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But also he had his coworkers were nearby, and there were several of them. So that could have played, into the variables as well. And the fact that he was defecating out there, like I said, it might have seen that as a marking in its territory, and that might have been what prompted the the exchange there.
Yeah, and I know that Taz didn't really talk about this too much, but I would imagine that creature and others that were with it were probably watching those guys, and it probably was following him as he went to the bathroom.
Yeah, they were observing him. I mean, or it was probably already in the tree, for whatever reason. But very, very interesting encounter, that's for sure.
Yeah. One encounter that I came across too was, and I know that we've heard this before actually from, I forget her name, but this is over a year ago. We talked to her too, but or maybe I just read this somewhere or heard it on another podcast, but there was a report of somebody that had an encounter and they came across a snake that was alive and something had tied it in 2 knots. And I can't remember if that was someone that we talked to before as well, but I came across this story too where somebody else had seen the same thing. And they said, obviously, the snake didn't do that to itself, and it could have been a human, but subsequently, there's some other things that happened that led them to believe that a Sasquatch probably did that. But have you heard that before, where they'll tie snakes into knots?
I haven't, no. Throwing snakes, yes. Eating them, yes. Tying them in knots, no, I haven't heard that.
Okay, maybe I just heard that from another podcast. But and anyways, though, they said that the snake was still alive too, and obviously the snake didn't do that to himself. But also, though, later on, the same person, they were camping and they were in a tent that night, and they heard all kinds of sounds related to Sasquatch, and they could clearly hear, while they're in the tent, they could clearly hear something walking around on 2 legs. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, hypothetically, it could have been a person. But anyways, though, they didn't, because it was dark and everything, they could kind of make out the shape on the outside of the tent, and it was touching the tent. It was moving its hand around. And this guy claims that he shot 3 .44 caliber bullets at point blank range. And obviously he couldn't tell if he hit it in the face or the chest or wherever, but he said that it didn't kill it, but the thing screamed and stormed off. Mm-hmm. The point is that 3 bullets at point blank range, and this thing still, because I've heard you talk before, well, a bullet from a gun is not necessarily going to take this thing out. Right?
No, I interviewed 100 years ago in the Mount St. Helens area that said while he was deer hunting, he saw one of these things walking right down the road, and I don't know what prompted him to shoot it, but he shot it. He hit it in the right shoulder because he saw the hair, move when the bullet hit. The thing turned around, gave him a dirty look, and it took off running. So it didn't knock it down. It just kind of ticked it off, basically.
Yeah. Now, also, you could tell. Okay, so the next day, or the next morning, obviously they didn't sleep the whole night, and they went off and either hunting or wherever, and they came back to their camp, and they said that when they got back to their campsite, they said the whole thing had been ransacked. The tents, they had a truck there, of course, and the truck had its window smashed in. The tailgate was torn from its hinges. The front bumper was nearly ripped off or smashed down, nearly came off. the hood was smashed in, and so obviously they think that it was probably the same creatures that they had, or creature, but probably plural, that they had shot before, the night before.
And you can see examples of stories like that where, the camp has been ransacked or tore up, all going all the way back to the story, the Bauman story in Teddy Roosevelt's book.
Right.
Because their lean-to was knocked down on 2 separate occasions and their belongings had gone through. And I've talked to people, I knew a Vietnam veteran in Vancouver who was up. They were hunting, and him and his 4 or 5 friends, and they were out hunting. When they came back to the camp, their camp was completely tore up, and a very heavy cooler tossed around, with all the stuff in it.
Yeah. Now, well, I think I probably know the answer to this, but do they do this mainly looking for food, or do they do this to, like in this guy's case, to kind of send a message that they're not too happy with them being there, or is it both?
It could be both. I mean, it might be an opportunistic sort of thing if they take something when they're there, but a lot of times they'll just go in and destroy things just because.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a happy move when they do. They're probably disgruntled about the presence of the humans there.
Yeah, yeah. Now, speaking of killing one that we were just talking about, shooting them, now I'm not advocating people go out there and try to shoot them for the sake of killing them. It's not a really smart idea to go out looking for them to begin with. But hypothetically, though, if people really wanted to kill one, or if, let's just say that that they own property and they're being harassed by these things, wouldn't a better way of killing them actually be to poison them with some kind of food rather than trying to shoot them?
Possibly, but rather than try to do harm, I would think there'd be, of course, there are methods of getting rid of them off your property rather than doing something like that. And doing something like that could lead to much more harmful things to the people involved, than what you would do just the more benign things to get rid of them.
Yeah. But I guess my point is that the whole idea of going out there, because people do this, maybe stupidly, but they go out there and they try to find them and they're going to try to bring back a body, and just bringing guns is probably not a really good idea all the time.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Now, also, have you ever heard of Sasquatches? Because they obviously know what other animals' footprints look like, right? They're not stupid. They know that they leave prints. There was one report where a guy said that he was walking in the snow, and later, the next day or later that day, he saw his tracks that he had left from one place to another, and the Sasquatch had actually overstepped in his tracks, almost a way of kind of covering up or trying to cover up their own tracks. Have you ever heard of this before?
Not that particular thing, but, we talked to Dan and some other people who were expert trackers, and they talk about, them having a profile, being able to look at the prints and see what they're doing. And sometimes, in Dan in particular up in Canada, we talked to recently, mentioned that on one occasion, he could tell one time the creatures were just moving through an area, not in any particular mode other than going from point A to point B. On another occasion, he could tell by the profile of the prints that the creature was moving very stealthily through the area. So, but as far as hiding prints, it could be. Now, they're a higher primate. They're very intelligent. And most predatory animals, of course, recognize scat. So in other words, like a larger predator in an area will defecate on the scat piles of lower predators as sort of a dominance thing. Gotcha. in that area. So it's very possible the Sasquatch recognizes footprints. And
Yeah.
especially with humans running around, and we look at them very intently, and they know that I'm sure they've viewed us many times tracking animals and looking at the signs on the ground, and probably are somewhat at least aware that their footprints in an area might draw human activity. So that might be why we don't see them a lot of times. Whereas like in places like Bluff Creek during the decade of the 60s, late 50s to the late 60s, the prints were found in large quantities because it was an area that had not had human activity prior to that time period. So that was relatively new, you
Right.
know. And then after Patterson got the film, now the creatures are still in that region. It's just, it kind of appears that they've wisened up a little bit and are maybe a little more careful about leaving those signs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that they're a lot more cautious than previously.
Yeah.
But do you think that they definitely recognize deer prints and they look for deer prints?
You know, I'm not sure. They, of course, recognize a game trail, but then, you know, so do other predators.
Yeah.
But as far as the actual footprints, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any indication that they do or they don't.
Yeah. Now another encounter is really kind of scary too, because I know we talked about last week where I forget the witness's name, but he mentioned that the creature, the Sasquatch, was able to open doors. I mean, it's not surprising that they do that, but there's another account too where this guy he went to his cabin and he had a snowmobile there, and he gets there and something. He thinks that it's got to be because he had other activity before, and it's not like humans could really do this. He said that his snowmobile, the whole windshield was tore off, and something had gotten inside the cabin. It had actually opened the door, and it raided its cupboard. And he said the whole pantry was just everything was just scattered all over. Whatever it came in, ate 8 boxes of pancake mix and 6 boxes of cereal. And it just makes you wonder how many other instances there are out there where these creatures will come into people's areas when they're not away. They'll open doors.
I know of a few, and I tell you, I've heard people. There are many instances where, you know, they I'm sure they watch people, you know, grab the knob on a door and open the door. But in many cases, I mean, they don't really seem to know how that functions, but they'll mess with it. You know, in an attempt to do whatever the person they saw do, unsuccessfully most of the time. But there have been occasions where, and depending on, you know, the type of doorknob or whatever, especially if it's a latch, the kind that turns up and down, would be much easier for them because, you know, then you got a 50-50 chance of pushing up or down and the door opening if it's unlocked. So, but there have been cases where they have gotten into houses. Of course, we, you know, talked to TW about his friend John, the man who got the finger bit off.
Yeah. And of course, too, I mean, if they really want to get inside something, they could just kick the thing in or pound the thing in. And with their strength, it would be no issue at all.
And that also has happened with cases. So, you know, people think those things don't happen. They do happen. They're not common, but they do happen.
Yeah. Now, I know that you don't go out hunting anymore, do you? You said.
Well, I haven't hunted game for a long time.
Okay.
I'm considering picking it up once I retire, you know, but that's a few years away yet.
Yeah, because I was going to say, because there are a lot of people that hunt at night, or even, you know, even deer hunters, sometimes they'll get up real early before daylight and get in their tree stands and stuff. Is that something that you just recommend people not do, is not hunt at night?
Well, you're not supposed to. I don't know about all states, but where I hunted in Washington, it was illegal to hunt prior to dawn and then after nightfall.
Oh, okay. Well, I just read that there are some people that go out and they hunt like hogs and raccoons at night and
Well,
stuff.
that's a different story,
Oh,
but
okay.
but with deer and elk, you're not really supposed to.
But I mean, obviously, it's more dangerous to hunt when it's dark than in the daylight.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I got to ask you about this because this is so absurd, but it's so funny too because it's so stupid. But I'm just curious if you heard about this supposedly respected scientist, and they wrote this book. It was in the 1970s originally, but I think it's been updated, new editions and so forth. But the supposed respected scientist claims that when they were a kid in the 70s, they befriended a Sasquatch. And the Sasquatch came by every night and he gave the Sasquatch apples and they ate meals together and had physical contact with each other, hugging each other. And the scientist named the Sasquatch King Kong. And it's so absurd, but at first I thought I started reading this thing and I'm thinking this has to be a joke, but she's dead serious. I'm just curious if you had ever heard about this scientist.
I hadn't heard that one. No.
But and the funny thing is too, you read the customer reviews and people are like, "Oh, I really believe this," and it's like, how stupid are people? But
Well,
I was just curious.
there's people who believe anything, unfortunately.
Yeah. Uh, hey, I'm not sure if DeHinden covered this, but have you ever heard of they call them the Bossberg cripple creature and the cripple footprints?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've
What-
got
what's-
I've got copies of the cast myself.
Okay, what's the story behind that? What was the background of that?
Well, in a nutshell, there had been reports in the Bossberg, Washington area. That's over eastern Washington near the Idaho border, and this was around 1970. And there were a number of events that led up to, John Green and Renee DeHinden. And DeHinden was actually with Ivan Marks, who initially had some very interesting finds, footprints and actually a couple of handprints that he cast. And then years later, which I think he sort of falls into the same category as Ray Wallace, where Wallace, never really proved that he hoaxed things, whereas Ivan Marks, by the late 80s, was 88 or 89, perpetrated a hoax that got some big attention. It was somebody in this crazy looking suit, and everybody believed it was real at first because of the way it splashed water around, and without looking at the ridiculousness of it, and it was proven that it was fake. But anyway, Marks was with DeHinden when they actually found the cripple footprints, and there was around 1,000 tracks in the snow that they followed. So, and the right foot has a number of deformities, and the left foot is normal. I think it was left and right. Anyway, one foot was deformed, the other one wasn't.
Okay. Okay. Just a few questions here about the Patterson film. Is the area of the Patterson film, is that still accessible today?
It's difficult to find. A lot of people think they've been there because when you go up Bluff Creek, there's really only two main ways into the creek. Mm-hmm. One near the mouth of the creek that goes into the Klamath River, and a lot of people think that's where the film site is, and it's not. It's 7 miles upstream.
Mm-hmm.
7 miles or 13. 13 miles is the whole length, so it's 7 miles up. And without doing a really good search with the map, because the road has trees over it and it's overgrown in places, it's actually very difficult to find. I've been there, and it was a bit of a challenge. You can only drive so far, then you have to walk,
right,
to actually get to the film site. But and of course that's completely different than it was back in '67. Actually, the film site changed just a year later because it flooded through there, so it was all very different after that.
Yeah. Now there's one writer out there. I won't say his name, but he's got a theory about the whole Patterson film, and there's a reason why I don't necessarily believe his theory, but he claims that he doesn't claim, this is all kind of speculation, so he's not saying that he's got proof of this or anything like that, but he claims that when Gimlin tells a story about the whole incident, that he's not lying. He really thinks that he saw the creature and everything, but this writer's theory is that Patterson may have staged the incident so that Gimlin thought it was real, but in fact Patterson had arranged the hoax. Have you heard of that theory before, or have you ever thought of that?
I've heard people say things like that. That's just utter nonsense.
Well,
those two guys were together. Now, people who come up with these ideas don't remember. And when we did the Jerry Crew story, Ivan Sanderson remarked in that writing that the road crews lived on the roads. And there's only really one way in and out of those places. So anybody going in or coming out would be seen by those workers. And the only people they saw was Patterson and Gimlin up there.
Yeah. Well, either way, whether one believes in the film's authenticity or not, the reason why I don't think that this guy's theory holds water is just the fact that Gimlin was armed, right? He was carrying a gun.
He was.
And so, I mean, there was no guarantee. Like, let's say that that Patterson arranged for some guy to be there in a suit. Well, Gimlin was armed, and he was the closer to it, I think, at first, right? And then, so...
Yes, he was actually closer than Patterson.
Yeah, so that guy in the suit would have been taking a huge chance because Gimlin may have shot the thing.
Oh, exactly. And, they were 4 miles up the creek from their camp, and I know the place they camped at. And it's, even today, it's still a lot of wilderness in there. Just to get somebody to that location is just ridiculous, the whole premise. And then we could go into the whole suit thing. We've talked about that before.
Oh.
In 1967, State of the Art was Planet of the Apes.
Right.
And they had to wear clothes because they had to hide these huge fasteners in the back of the suit where the actor entered the suit. They didn't have the technology to make a suit like that. Right.
Yeah, actually, well, let me jump ahead a couple questions. I was actually going to get to that because I just recently saw footage again from I've seen the movie before a long time ago, but the original Planet of the Apes from 1968. Mm-hmm. And if you go back, and you can find clips of them on YouTube, and I was amazed at how poor those costumes really look. I mean, they look, the Patterson film looks, let's just say that was a guy in a suit. That suit looks way more authentic.
It would have been decades ahead of what Disney was able to do, and they were the top special effects people.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that with the film, the neck and shoulder placement as the arms swing and the head turns, Patty's chin actually goes. You could see it go into her shoulder. They said that that just shows you how tight. It couldn't have been a suit necessarily because it was so tight. You could see her chin go into her shoulder, and there's no folds or anything. Whereas they did kind of a reenactment of some guy wearing a suit, and when he mimics that action of turning her body, and you can see that the suit folds in that reenactment.
Exactly. And Bill Munns, when he did work on the film, and he made suits for movies. Like he made Swamp Thing, the suit for that movie. And he talked about, in a suit, the joints where the joints of the actor the suit has to line up with those.
Yeah.
Now they can make extensions for arm length, but like the legs and things like that, all those joints have to match up. And it was very obvious that the Sasquatch in the Patterson film would not match up to human specs, where the human joints are.
Yeah, and let me ask you too, the fact that her knees never lock, was that something, I guess it doesn't prove it either one way or the other, whether it's a hoax or whether it's real, but I'm just curious, was that a well-known thing at that time that Sasquatches did not lock their knees?
No, that was not well known.
Okay, so that adds more credence to its
Yeah,
authenticity.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that the whole Bob Hieronymus, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but when he was asked about it, the location he gave was way off. I mean, I'm talking like he said it was just about 4 miles up the Bluff Creek, and it was actually like way into the forest, and like you just said, twisting steep narrow road
Oh
just to
yeah,
get to the camp, and then it was another 3 or 4 miles of hiking.
yeah. It was
You
it was
like
4 miles on horseback from where they camped up the stream.
Yeah. But the point is that Bob Hermonis guy, when he was asked to name the location, I mean, he was miles and
He couldn't
miles.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing too, that when they were analyzing this in this other book that I found, they found that there are certain points where the creature, well, Patty, we'll just call her Patty, she keeps both feet on the ground for an unusual amount of time
Hmm.
in frames, which is not like how humans walk.
Yeah, it's a very unhuman gait.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask you: was there any time at all? Now, you came at it a little bit different than most people because you had the encounter before ever seeing the Patty film, whereas for most people it's the other way around. But
Hmm.
was there any time when you maybe had some questions or maybe doubted the Patterson film and whether it was real or not, or did you always think it was real?
When I saw it, I knew instantly it was real
Hmm.
because it was so similar to what I actually saw in the flesh.
Hmm. Okay. Um, Also, just out of curiosity, when you talk to witnesses, now like we just talked to Taz, and he said that he had already believed in the subject beforehand, but
Hmm.
what if you were to list a percentage of the people that you've talked to that have encounters, what was their experience about the subject or their belief about the subject beforehand? Were most people believers or skeptic or on the fence or didn't believe at all?
Most
Would you
people
say?
didn't. Most people didn't have much knowledge about it. They were actually quite a bit like I was.
Mhm.
Either had never heard of it or very rudimentary bits of knowledge. They might have seen something on television, in passing, maybe a commercial, or saw a show on television, and that was about it. They had very little or no knowledge of the creatures,
Yeah.
and that
And
accounts for probably 75% of the witnesses I've talked to.
mhm. Yeah, and I would imagine too that like in your situation, you saw one early in your teens, but I could just imagine the oh my gosh, what the heck am I seeing? And the just the fear when people who have been out in the woods, 30 years and they claim, oh, I've never seen anything. And then all of a sudden after living or being in the woods their entire life, being hunters their entire life, all of a sudden after 30 or 40 years they see something. I could just imagine it's probably even more of a
Huge,
shock.
a huge
More,
shock, yeah, because it kind of shakes the whole foundation of your worldview.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I can imagine. Um, I mean, your experience seeing one as a teen, I'm sure was bad enough or scary enough, but I could just imagine the shock that someone might feel when they've been in the woods for so many years, and then all of a sudden they're seeing something that's supposed to not exist.
I can imagine because, granted, I didn't have a lot of experience in life. I was 16 when I saw those two. But I hunted with my dad and my uncle and fished a lot. I spent a lot of time in the summers fishing, and a lot of times it was usually just with one other person or by myself. When I would hunt, my dad and uncle, or if we'd go with a couple of his buddies, you know, we would all have our game plan. We'd all go different directions, so we were hunting by ourselves. And then we would meet back, at a predetermined location later in the day. And I remember after having that encounter thinking, oh my God, there could have been one or more of those things around at any time when I was up, sneaking through the forests, on the west side of Mount Rainier hunting, and these things were in that area and are in that area.
Hmm.
So it kind of makes you think, and I can imagine somebody who spent, decades doing those activities and having an encounter and thinking all of those years, did they see things that maybe were actually done by these things, or heard noises that they weren't sure what they were, and then maybe it was these, or, it would make you go through all these questions about things that you've experienced in your life.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to jump ahead here on my list. Okay, this just could be coincidence, or it just, maybe it means something, maybe they're mimicking us. But as you're probably aware, when somebody's in distress in the wild, supposedly if they fire 3 gunshots right in a row, it's kind of a distress symbol. Or
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you need help, that's usually what it means.
Yeah, now there have been reports, and this could just be coincidence, but of 3 tree knocks, and people have reported hearing that, and it's almost like, is the Sasquatch trying to warn the others that there's something else in the area? Or, I mean, is that just coincidence, the whole 3 thing, or do you think that they've heard that before and they do the 3 knocks as a warning to try to mimic us?
It's hard telling. I mean, I'm sure that different sounds have different meanings for them. And again, it's not like a language. So it's like per group, because they're going to be group specific, these communications. Right. They might make the same sound in a different group, but it might have a different meaning for them. The same holds true with chimps and gorillas, but it's really hard telling whether it's, maybe do it twice means one thing and maybe 3 means something else, or it's just coincidental. Who knows? I mean, it's really up in the air. It's just speculation at this point.
Yeah. Now, in all of your years of researching this creature and everything, are you maybe surprised that you haven't seen more, or have you just probably after your experiences, maybe you don't want to make a serious effort to see them again? Maybe you're retired from that.
Well, like a lot of people for a long time, it was just kind of the shotgun approach. I'd look at an area, of course, a little more fine-tuned. I mean, a lot of people just go out and kind of look around where an area they think they might see something. I would go to locations where there had been, clusters of activity and base the search on that activity. But and you don't get a lot of success because the creatures don't often come back to those places, maybe for years. So you can look in an area where there are clusters of activity and not find anything. But in recent past couple of years, with a lot of this knowledge that I've gained, I'm going to be taking that out here in the next few months, and utilizing that knowledge, and it's literally decades ahead of anything currently available out there. So people get mad that I don't talk about this stuff, but it's because I want to go out and use it myself first and really field test it. So we'll see what happens after the end of summer. Hopefully I won't be a sack lunch somewhere, but I've marginally tested the information, and with very, we've had 100% results in a few field tests. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to get very close to these things, because the knowledge I've been given puts us right on them, right in the exact kind of places where they favor and things like that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Now I wanted to ask you too, one, I guess, question that people have sometimes is, why aren't there more sightings if there's so many of these creatures and so forth? But let me ask you this, because this one writer claims that if you do sort of a survey, or you just ask the majority of people that go hunting, the vast majority of them don't go more than a mile from where their vehicles are. Now, I don't know if
Most
is that true?
Yeah, we used to laugh about all the road hunters, and that's the guys, that drive around and they get maybe 20 feet from their truck.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
it's illegal, at least in Washington it is. It's illegal to shoot from your truck. You have to be, I can't remember how many feet actually away from the vehicle to shoot at an animal, but I mean, there's
Yeah.
some very specific rules, but there's a lot of guys, and when I'd go hunting with my dad and his buddies in particular, they'd find a rock someplace near the road, and that's where they'd sit. They'd hunt from the rock, and the kid, I'm out, wading rivers and stuff like that, actually hunting deer, and my dad too. But lots and lots and lots of guys. That's kind of the common joke, with hunters or about the road hunters.
Yeah, and well, I mean, there are reasons for that. Partially because they don't want to risk getting lost. They don't want to go too far away. Part of it might be also that if they
laziness.
laziness, yeah, that's definitely part of it. Also, if they do shoot let's just say a 500-pound elk, the dragging it all the way back to the truck could be a task and so forth. But anyways,
yeah, I can tell you, my dad, when he was teaching me how to hunt as a kid, we were up on this or a rim of a canyon, and we were looking down. Oh, geez, I don't remember. You could see probably half a mile away down to the tree line, and we'd see a dozen, 15 head of elk meandering around. He says, now we could shoot one of those. He said, but you gotta think, those things get up around 1,500 pounds. You got to quarter it. He says, are you going to put it on your pack board and make 4 trips down and back to the truck? And he says, the smart thing to do would be, to shoot one much closer, so you don't have to exert so much energy to get it to your, cleaned and out to your vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, this one writer claims that hunters who go more than at least a mile away from the nearest road have a 95% better chance of getting an animal, harvesting an animal, than the hunters who hunt a mile or less from from a road.
Oh yeah.
And so when you think about it, that's. I mean, I was going to ask a question, but I mean, it's pretty obvious that that's probably one of the reasons why there aren't a lot more sightings, is because people really don't go that far deep into the woods most of the time,
and
or they don't go.
Actually, saying that there aren't a lot of sightings is inaccurate. We get a lot of sightings.
Yeah, but I mean more sightings.
There's actually, well, I would say the more accurate way to put that are more reported.
More reported.
There's a lot of sightings, like I said earlier. When you asked me the percentage or how many, people who don't report something as a, for everyone who does, and it's 20 or more easily. I mean, it could be 100. Who knows? There's lots and lots of sightings. I come across so many people who will tell me that they know X a number of people, 1, 2, 3 people that they know that have had sightings, and they'll never talk about it. I don't know how many people, I run these leads down and they always come back, well, I couldn't get the person to talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I'm sorry, I just want to mention one thing about hunters, bow hunters. These guys are phenomenal. I remember hunting one time, and how, it's before, of course, I went in the military and learned about camouflage. I was hiking pretty deep into this area. I was well beyond that mile, where most people won't go. And I was moving pretty stealthily. I was on the track of a pretty good sized buck, and I'll bet maybe 30 feet from this guy in a tree, and I didn't see him. I mean, I was right there, and the guy was just phenomenal. And he finally spoke up, and I about crapped myself because the guy was right there, and I thought I was all by myself out there. But I gotta give kudos to bow hunters. Those guys, you guys are phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, on that note too, about why there aren't more reported sightings? Because, in the past we've talked about, well, obviously people are scared of being ridiculed. They are questioning their own sanity, perhaps. But how about this reason as well? How about a lot of people maybe don't report them because they don't want attention being drawn to their town? In other words, they don't want a bunch of people coming in here, a bunch of outsiders coming into their town and trying to find and,
Oh, that's a big one, sure. And not just their town, but their property.
Right, yeah.
I've always been careful to protect people's property. And I saw it firsthand. I used the Goldhammer incident in Yakult. That's a prime example partially because we were there so long, where most investigations aren't that long in a location. And there were people, were coming there bugging the family before we came, and they liked me and my people, so they asked that anybody who wanted to come there had to get permission from us and be escorted by one or more of my team members there. They wanted that control. They didn't want people just wandering aimlessly all over their property, and I don't blame them for that.
Yeah. Now, are you kind of reluctant to talk to strangers about the subject? Like, let's say that you're in a restaurant or something, and you can overhear the people next to you or behind you talking about Sasquatch. Would you say, "Hey, everybody, I know a little bit about the subject," or are you kind of just maybe kind of reluctant to bring the subject up?
Nowadays, no. I have no problem talking to people about it. But up to the mid 80s, I was. By then, I started thinking, I need to just pick people out, and we'd do it in restaurants. Me and a buddy who would be heading to the field, we'd stop for breakfast. It was kind of our routine. We'd stop at a local restaurant someplace in the Columbia River Gorge, and I would get up and just go over to a table, pick somebody out, and go ask them. And most of the time, probably 99% of the time, people were, very polite. I don't think I ever had anybody be nasty. But it was almost always the case of, they were either interested, or sometimes, you'd find somebody that saw one. A lot of times it was, I haven't seen one, but I know someone who has, and I'll get them to talk to you.
Right. Well, I think in general, the more people read up on the subject, the more likely they are to be, at least, let's say that somebody's a non-believer at first, they're more likely to say, hey, maybe I'll give the idea some thought. Like, I'll consider that maybe it does exist. I mean, if you take into account all of the, tens and hundreds of thousands of accounts going back in history and footprint evidence and other evidence and so forth, it seems like the more that people read up on the subject, the more, I'm not looking for the word, not gullible, but I mean the more likely that they're going to accept it.
More accepting, yeah. And, it's funny, we're talking about talking to people. Nowadays, at this point in my life, it's usually people around me, friends and family. They'll have somebody, it'll come up in their conversation, and they'll say, "Oh, you got to talk to him." So they're bringing him to me to talk to, or even in Julie's shop, she has some of my books for sale on one of her racks, and they're right in the front when people walk in the door. So if I happen to be at the shop and somebody asks, she'll point to me and she says, "You got to talk to him. He's the author."
Yeah. Hey, how many more questions do you want to do here? Or how much time do?
Well, it's up to you. What do you feel like doing?
Well, I tell you what, we can go through a couple more questions, and then there's something. I guess we can maybe save it for next week.
Okay.
This will be kind of a tease for next week. But I found this master's thesis that this woman did last year, 2018. It's about this museum, the Sasquatch Museum, but she goes into detail she talks about DeHinden's books, Green's books, and so forth. And I'd love to be able to contact this woman to maybe have her on.
Oh, yeah.
And because she actually did, for her thesis, she did some survey questions from these people that went in, and some of the statistics are pretty interesting. But we could kind of save that maybe for next week, because that'll take a little time.
Let's do that. And it would be interesting to have her on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, her name's there, and I know the college she went to, and I'm not sure if her contact information is there, but yeah, I'd love to see if I can get a hold of her. Okay, so just maybe a couple more questions here. Okay, since their arms are longer, we just had Taz come on, and he said the same thing too, that the arms were longer than went down to its knees.
Yes.
Do you think that this perhaps indicate that the creatures are more ape-like as opposed to human-like? Since apes are, gorillas and chimpanzees have way longer arms than humans do.
Well, that's certainly a physical attribute that fits more with great apes than humans.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, because there's always the debate, are they more ape-like or more human-like? And, of course, that might depend on the types and everything. But actually, on that note, the whole alien thing, like, oh, they're not apes or humans, they're aliens. Where did that come about? And do you know who started that and why that became such a popular...
I don't know who started that, but I think... there was a time period, I think it was in the 1970s, where, and there was a lot of UFO stuff going on at that time. I think maybe it was just the interest, because that's been stuff that's gone on for a long time. It was just getting a lot more media attention, I believe, at that time. And they were happening in areas where, coincidentally, there was Bigfoot stuff going on. Well, there's, Sasquatches are all over the place, so you're bound to get things happening like that in the same areas. But, of course, people like to connect dots. So since it didn't fit into their frame of reference, they said, oh, well, they got to be aliens. Well, why would aliens be primates? You know what I mean? An alien creature is going to be very, very different than anything on this planet. So, and I know there are people that are going to have all sorts of comments about that, but when you look at what scientists, exobiologists who talk about what alien life would be like, they say it would be very, very different because of all the variables in where it would be from. It's not very likely they would be primates.
Yeah. I have to say, too, that one of the reasons why maybe people are skeptical about the whole Bigfoot is because there have been not just hoaxers from this subject, Bigfoot, but there have been a lot of hoaxes with alien abductions. Like there was that guy, they did that movie Fire in the Sky. It turns out that guy was was hoaxing. And then there was another thing called the Allagash abductions or something. It turns out that they admitted that they were lying. Like it seems like the whole Bigfoot subject gets maybe a bad rap just because of other subjects that are where people are just making stuff up.
Yeah, I guess in terms of Fire in the Sky, though, I'm actually friends with Travis Walton on Facebook, and he maintains his story.
Oh, I thought that he admitted that it was fake.
Oh no, he's and his story is actually very interesting, very compelling. So, but you're right, there have been plenty of fake stuff out there, and I think just because of the people, I mean, you can have 100 legitimate encounter stories, and you get one person who does something squirrely like Rick Dyer, and that's enough to throw, people who are on the fence off.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them because, it does make things look stupid, and it's really unfortunate.
You know what? Actually, I think you're right. The one I'm thinking of, well, there's one that's called the Allagash abductions or whatever. The Fire in the Sky one, I think you're right. I think what I heard about that is that I think that Travis, what's his name? Travis Walton, you said?
Travis Walton, yeah.
Yeah. I think that I heard from either him or something else that the movie didn't get all the details right or something like
yeah,
that.
they changed a lot of his story. When you
Yeah.
read his account, because like things like the inside of the ship, on the movie was kind of
Yeah.
nasty looking, and the way he described it was a very antiseptic kind of a environment, and there was actually other ships inside the larger one with two different types of aliens, ones that looked human for all intents and purposes, and the other ones who were little gray aliens. So, and he said neither type actually talked to him, and he talked, and it was very interesting, the actual story. They, with movies, a lot of times they involve dramatic license and change all sorts of things, but, which is unfortunate because the actual story is much more interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And, but of course, other subjects too, like I know that Taz mentioned like the Loch Ness Monster and
Right.
And there have been a lot of people that came out and just admitted that they were. There was also another, I think on Lake Champlain or something. There was another monster. So there's a lot of stuff out there that I think Bigfoot, the whole subject, sometimes gets maybe not confused with, but I mean it
gets thrown into the same category, and I've mentioned it before that the subject of Bigfoot should be singular. It should be separated from all that other stuff, and there's. I guess it's what we're hardwired to do to lump things into groupings. But in all reality, this subject needs to be separate from all that other stuff because it's very different. Not just it's, a different sort of creature, but there's so much material on this subject where there isn't really for all the other ones. Nowhere near as much.
Right, right.
And not just that, but in terms of natural history, everything lines up like it should be for the existence of a creature like this, where some other things, they don't at all.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, how about this? Last question.
Okay.
One thing I've thought of to kind of switch the topic a little bit, but if you look at American history, do you think that the Sasquatch, one of the reasons why there are so many sightings and reports in the Pacific Northwest and just out in the West Coast in general, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and so forth, do you think that part of that might be related to the history of European settlers? Because when they first came over, they were on the 13 colonies and they were on the East Coast. And do you think that maybe pushed the creature westward?
That's kind of been my thinking for a lot of years. I always wondered that myself. Now, we do have plenty of sightings across the country, but I think, as settlers moved west, that human presence probably drove a fair number of them west. Could also be that, with the mountainous and the heavy forest of the northwestern part of the country, that maybe that was, number one, a better area for food. It was for the Native Americans in those regions, as opposed to, natives on other parts of the country, but also, more places to be away from humans in those areas. So it could have been a natural place for them for a number of reasons, but it could have also been due to that westward expansion.
Yeah, that's just something that I thought of. So it seemed that would make sense, but...
Yeah, I always wondered it myself. It was one of those things that kind of, floats around in your mind, and you just have to wonder sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
alrighty, well, I guess we'll wrap it up here. Great session as always, Brian, and folks, stay tuned for the third segment, the reading by Jim Sower. And also, I wanted to start mentioning, if there's anybody out there who is in the industry that deals with voiceover work, Jim is interested in getting involved in that. So, you can contact Brian or I, and, if anybody's interested in Jim's talent. So anyway, folks, stay tuned for the third segment with Jim's narration. Appreciate you listening as always. And Brian, we'll pick this up again next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Welcome. This story is being brought to you by William Jevning and is being narrated by Jim Sower. This story is The Monster of Dead Man's Hole from Southern California, San Diego County. A horrible tale from the pages of local history. Mysterious ethnic monsters are all the rage today. Best known is the abominable snowman of Tibet. Then there's the Yowie of Australia, Bigfoot of California, the Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest, Nessie of Loch Ness, Scotland, and the Wild Man of Hubei in China. Yet San Diego County wasn't left behind the door when the monsters were passed out. Long before San Diego's Zoobies were sighted and recorded, there was the monster of Dead Man's Hole. Just about as nasty as they come, it was reported long before the monsters come lately mentioned above. Dead Man's Hole is located near Oak Grove, a former stop of the Butterfield stage line. It is located about 10 miles northeast of Warner Hot Springs. The story of the horrid events leading up to the discovery of the monster was told many years ago by James Jaspar, editor and owner of the Julian Sentinel in Julian, California. Julian is now a thriving little artist community renowned for its homegrown apple pies, and Warner Hot Springs is a hot spa for the wealthy in the backcountry of San Diego County. When the Butterfield stage line was established, it ran by the then nameless Dead Man's Hole, then filled with clear sparkling water. Often a stop was made to refresh men and horses before resuming the trip. Behind the hole, a canyon slices back into the steep hills, growing darker and darker and narrower as it winds back into the still wild and roadless escarpment frowning over the pleasant valley below. As it gets deep into the mountains, the canyon walls are so steep and its trees so thick and somber that sunlight only penetrates to the bottom for an hour or so at noon. One bright morning in the spring of 1858, the northbound stage stopped at the hole, and the driver got out for a drink. As he leaned over the pool, he saw, to his horror, the partly decomposed face of a dead man bobbing gently in the water. This was the first known victim of Dead Man's Hole. As time went by, news was received in San Diego that several men, both Indian and white, had disappeared without a trace. But since people were always running away from their families or going off to seek gold, not much notice was paid to these reports. In 1870, an unnamed Frenchman, a sheepherder, was found dead in the hole by his squaw. In 1876, a passenger lighting from the stage for a drink said that he had seen a naked thing covered with long black hair staring at him from nearby bushes. When the creature saw he was discovered, he vanished down the canyon. A few years later, a man named William Blair was found strangled in the dark woods near the hole. He had influential and wealthy friends in San Francisco, and they came down to the area determined to find his murderer. But no clues were found. Later that year, the strangled body of an Indian girl was found not 200 feet from where Blair's body had been discovered. In March 1888, two hunters, Edward Dean and Charles Cox of Julian, determined to explore the dark and mysterious canyon behind Dead Man's Hole. After a hard struggle, they managed to get about a mile up the canyon through a tangle of fallen logs, boulders, and underbrush. As they paused for breath, they heard a crashing nearby. Cox climbed up the rocky side of the canyon to see what was making the noise. He almost fell off in astonishment. An immense, unwieldy animal resembling a bear from the back was taking rapid strides through the narrow defile away from the hunters. Cox said its legs were long, and the creature looked something like a gorilla. Its hair was dark brown, and the beast was more than 6 feet high. Cox climbed down and whispered the news to Dean. Both began to follow the thing. Cox, to arrest its progress, fired a shot in the air. At the report, the beast turned its face toward its pursuers. The face was human. Then the creature started climbing the canyon wall toward a cave opening. Cox fired, and with a terrible cry, the monster fell to the canyon floor, dead. Cautiously approaching the body, the men later reported the face was Indian, but the teeth were like a bear's fangs with pointed ends. The creature's feet were huge and covered with black hair. Fearing they would meet the monster's mate, they climbed gingerly up to the cave mouth, then entered. It was empty, but in one corner 8 human skulls grinned from a rock ledge, while a half-consumed sheep carcass lay on the floor. In a corner, a pile of leaves and weeds indicated the creature's bed. In a report given in a San Diego newspaper of the 1888 era, Jasper said the monster's body had been placed in a wagon and taken to San Diego, where it was to have gone on exhibition the next day. But examination of later papers said nothing of the monster. Local historians pondered the question, and there was no answer, since editor Jasper and his contemporaries were long dead. Then, this reporter saw a glimmering of light. He noticed the date of the edition of the paper in which the story had been published, April 1st, 1888. Source: Historical Headlines by Herbert Lockwood, Daily Transcript staff writer, August 27th, 1996. This is the end of the story. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.